You're listening to the Perth Property Show, Australia's only weekly property podcast by West Australian experts for West Australian listeners. Catch your latest episode every Monday at 7 a.m.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Perth Property Show. My name's Trent Fleskins, your host as always. This week we have a very in-demand episode. We're going to have a good look at the West Australian residential construction industry. Not only are we going to have a chat about where it's at now, we're going to do a little bit of a rear view mirror over the last 5 years or so and get really honest and candid with someone who's been right in the depths of it over his journey and certainly over the last 5 or so years of our journey on the podcast in the West Australian property market as to what has been going on in this crazy place. Jay Walter from JWH Group, thanks for coming in, mate.
Thanks for having us, Trent. Appreciate it.
It's a story that I think you could make a movie out of nearly when we think about the last 5 years in construction and the 5 years before that. A lot of people have been killed off in certain episodes along the way. We've had some winners and a lot of losers. But one thing we do know is that the market never stops. The industry continues to evolve and adapt. I don't know which season we're in now. Let's call it season 5. But it's one that hopefully is finding a little bit of stability after years of some pretty tormented times. You've had a lot of experience, a lot of years in this game. How far back do you want to go in starting this story?
I've been around construction my whole life, growing up in a family business. I think like a lot of other people, property, building, houses, investments, all that sort of stuff, being a part of it. And you see the ups and downs and all that kind of thing, but you sort of know that it's not always going to get better. It could get better, it could get worse, but what's inevitable, it's just going to keep changing. It's going to be different every time around.
When did you join the family business is probably the better question.
2007, 2008. I started in at Plunkett Homes. We'd more recently acquired as part of the group. It was exciting because they're one of the oldest building companies in the country. It was great to be in a business that was new to our group, so it was sort of a mishmash of cultures between JWH and taking on Plunkett. At the same time, it was a good time to be in the industry because there was a lot happening. So,
did it feel similar to today? Are there any similar vibes, any similar dynamics from back in 2007, which most people would suggest is the last time we really felt we were in a property boom, not specifically construction, but a property boom as we are in now? How does the construction industry relate to that time back then?
The one thing that has not changed whatsoever is the people in the industry are as passionate as ever. You hang out with builders, you hang out with people in property, all that sort of stuff. The majority of us generally love what we do. It's good fun. It's the one thing that you can see at the moment. I remember when I first entered the industry was just that frustration of not being able to deliver as easily or efficiently or as quickly as you'd like to. And that's more just due to the congestion that's in the industry because the demand is bigger than the supply.
So was that a reality back then as it is now?
Now it's probably a lot more on steroids than what it was back then. But it's definitely got a lot of familiarity to it, yeah.
When we think about progressing from 2007 onwards, one thing that's different about this property boom now compared to back then is it seemed like we didn't have the same supply constraints. In every asset market, when there's an increase in demand and an increase in capacity to demand, generally the market is incentivized to meet that with supply. It might take a year or two to do so, especially with an asset like property, but eventually the market meets the demand with supply and sometimes overshoots it, which is why we see prices drop in assets, which is what we saw after the big mining boom and Chevron and Pluto and all the tradies leaving, and we're still building for people that aren't even here anymore. That essentially explains the early teens in Western Australia. But it feels like the supply of tradies, the ability for us to meet demand is nowhere near what it was 10 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, I think some of the things that have changed, you're now up to 2-3 generations of, and I'll say trades and contractors, where a lot of them have actually told their kids not to follow in their footsteps. There is this big perception that if you want to be successful in life and all that kind of thing, you've got to go to university, you've got to get a degree. Sadly, as a result, that has had an impact on the amount of people who do go and pursue an apprenticeship or taking on a trade. I think at the same time, things have changed where just how people are, what sort of careers they want to do. It's hard work. Whether you've got 40-degree days and it's really hot and you're in the sun, or an 8-degree morning, it's raining, all that kind of thing, and you've got guys on a roof trying to put roof cover on. It's not easy. The people who do it love it. It's just sadly, I think in a way, we just don't have as many people doing it.
So you think we've reached that generation in Australia, whether it's a socioeconomics or socio-demographics, where we're just becoming a more tertiary society and far less people are choosing trades, and we're not importing enough trades to back that up. So we have a lot of demand for the product, but are not enough people in society willing to do the work to create the product.
I think so. Like, we need to adapt or die in a way, because we're not going to have the trades, so we'll have to pay more. Versus, is that where we need to start bringing in different type of technologies which can help with building for some of the things that less and less people do want to do.
Are you talking about modular, prefab, automating?
Yeah, all of the above. I think at the end of the day, at the same time, compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago, what is going into a house now is different. People talk about how houses were cheaper and all that kind of thing, even houses from like 50 years ago. But I look at like some of those houses, they just don't. I mean, the electrical...
They don't compare.
Oh, just nowhere near.
Yeah, when you think about a house from the 70s, it was at least half the size. There was no garage. There was no al fresco. Lighting was minimal.
Yeah.
It was built from possibly timber veneer or brick veneer product. The specification level, the inclusions, there wasn't air conditioning. There was minimal appliances in the kitchen. There were just less things to buy to put in these homes in the first place, right?
Oh, absolutely. And in many ways, it's a good thing. Houses, there's more parts to them. There's more things that they can do. We've got more expectations on what our house can do. So it's all good things, but like anything, like all good things, they come to those who wait. So yeah, there's a bit of patience that has to come with it.
When we push forward through the early teens into the end of the last mining boom, the end of the last property boom, then get into a lull period there where not only did the demand drop off significantly because of a drop in population growth, we also saw a response from that in the building industry, where really a shrinking of the industry and a massive shrinking of trades.
Yeah.
From that as well, what I've seen at least is far less apprentices coming on board, which is impacting us now 10 years later with just a really small base of labour supply to actually ramp up for the demand we've got in the market right now. One of the criticisms I've had of previous state governments is at that point in time would have been the perfect time to prop up the building industry with a program of social housing. So I'm talking 2016 to 2020 essentially. And to be frank, probably just every year going forward or every year going back. Would that have helped in sustaining a trade base and just keeping even just the builders, giving them an extra 100 homes a year each to build just to keep our social housing supply levels going?
I think so in some ways. I guess everyone always looks at the government to solve the problems, and that is part of government, but I don't think it's all of government. The irony of social housing at times feels as though in a down market, that's when we should be building it, because we always need it the most when we're in a booming market. So,
and it's probably costing the least to the government as well in a down market.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's the irony of it. Will that change? Possibly. I guess you have to step back and look at it and go, is there a more sustainable way to do it? But we're also dealing with builders that come and go. We're dealing with governments that come and go. So it's like, what's the thing that's consistent? But that demand for social housing
that is
certainly there.
Right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I see there's an opportunity there where not only can you be building it at what would otherwise be the cheapest time for the taxpayer to build this social asset that we know we need long-term anyway, but also it's then propping up an industry that naturally is going through a downturn as well and creating this base of demand for the supply of labour and apprentices that are given an ability to actually have a job and keep a trade base for the time that we do have upturns in demand in the market. I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely is. And I think also the changing trends of social housing as well. I mean, a lot of what we build as builders is your typical 4x2s and all that kind of thing. I think one of the things that has hurt us a bit or compounded, and I say us not as builders, but us as a society, is we've kind of been caught out a bit where changing family and societal values has meant that the housing isn't necessarily matching the demand of what's needed. There is a lot of single tenants, single occupants sitting in like 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom homes. It's that sort of stuff where you wish with the wave of a wand you could match that better, because that's the sad part at the moment. Like that's what's causing that pressure. And I think even in the last few years as well with COVID and the impacts, divorce rates, it's just exacerbated it even more.
Less people living in every house.
Yeah.
So at that time, you would, I'm sure, remember this quite well. It was probably the worst time in building that you'd been in your career at that point, before COVID hit, before the building grants, for a different reason completely. How did building companies survive at the time? Was it essentially just look for all work you can and keep the doors open, not really much margin, not really much profit, we're just waiting for better times? Yeah,
I think obviously as a builder, you always want to have profitable work, but I think you also had to balance that out at sometimes where you would look at just the contribution of some of those projects and go, We can probably make a little bit of money out of that. But at the end of the day, it's helping keep the lights on. It's helping keep those sorts of things. In the building game, you're in cycles.
Yeah.
You just hope those cycles aren't wild and violent. But that's what you sort of programmed to operate with. I think at that point in time, you saw your margins erode. I mean, I remember, when they were predicting the downturn and what it was going to mean, they were talking about, we're going to go from so many thousand houses to so many thousand. And you're like, oh, no way, the industry won't sustain itself. And bricklayers are going to get cut from like $1.20 or something down to 80 cents or something. And you're like, no way. There's no way that'll happen. Like that was the water cooler talk. It's just like, there's no way the industry will be able to sustain itself. But then it happened. But then at the same time, once stimulus and COVID and all that kind of thing happened, the next minute they're saying, oh no, brickies are going to go to $2. And you're like, nah, no way. It can't go to $2. The industry will collapse. We can't pay $2. And then
went to $3.
And then literally within like weeks, it was like, oh, we're now paying $2. You're like, all right, well, we're there now. So let's just get on with it. And that maybe is part of the resilience of builders or people who are in this industry. Why they love it so much is because of what it delivers. But at the same time, with that, you just get embedded into this resilience just to keep building at all costs. Just
keep rolling the punches.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it seems to be an environment that certainly allows you to succeed when things are going well and when you have an ability to manage costs and demand is sufficient enough for you to keep the lights on and so on. But when the game changes the other way, which I don't think a lot of builders in this generation had actually experienced to the extent we have in the last few years, the contractual arrangements of being a builder certainly protects the client, the homeowner. Of course, it needs to. It's the way that consumer protection laws work. But it really has left the door open for the industry to get kicked in the nuts massively over the last few years, to the extent where every single builder could not stand there and say they hadn't lost significant money since COVID.
Any builder you'd be in a room with who said, nah, we're all good, everything's profitable, it's all hunky-dory, you were just sitting there going, well, you're clearly lying through your teeth. The fact that you'd be looking at certain points in time where you could just drive by certain houses you were building and you said, I've built that for love.
Or I've lost $100,000 on that house.
Yeah, I hope that person really enjoys that house because I haven't enjoyed the end result.
And they probably haven't, because they've seen a year at least in delay. Trade qualities might not be as good as they expected. They've had 4 different construction managers on site. All that experience that the homeowner will tell you, in addition to the fact that you've lost as well. Normally in a transaction, most of the time someone's won, someone's lost. In the last 4 years, everyone's lost except the tradie. It seems like the tradie is doing very well.
Yes, to me it's great to see trades earning more money for their craft, and it will feel deservedly so. I think at the same time that has come with its own pressures. They have had no shortage of work. You've got trades who are rocking up on site, and in some instances they have copped abuse from people.
Burnout,
depression. They've lived through COVID as well. I think they're not all winners, and I think at the same time, as builders, you only have to go online and you can see in some of the forums around builders, like there's a perception that builders have just been loving this, and you sort of go, no, not really, but at the same time, that's not the conversation that has to be had either, because I don't think the builders are looking for sympathy. We just want people to kind of understand that it hasn't been great for us either. But the one thing that many of us are unwavering in is how our dedication is to finish what we start.
When we think about the contractual arrangement that a builder would have made in June 2020, when thousands of these houses were instigated on the Building Boost program, you might be looking at building a 4x2 for someone in a house and land estate for $250,000. On the books, you would have planned for it to have cost you $200 and a bit thousand.
Yeah.
How much has that house probably cost you to build by the end of it in a lot of these cases?
Oh, I mean, you're probably looking at around 260, 270. I mean, your build costs from March 2020 to March 2024, we have a control model that we monitor internally where we keep repricing it every couple of months. The cost base of that has shifted 43%. So, I mean, they're quoting 30 to 35% in the media at the moment. That would be accurate, but lagging. Their data would be lagging compared to what I think ours would. It's a seismic shift. So, yeah, at the end of that, all you can do is just build as quick as you can and not
try and stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah, and not prolong the pain. At the same time, price increases, they've been out there. People haven't liked them. I can say now, as someone who's had to deliver them personally as well, builders don't love them. It's not fun. You do cop a bit of abuse and all that kind of thing. But you're doing it from the point of view of saying, I don't know anyone who would want to go start a project and break ground and know that from day one you're losing money. That's not good. And at the same time, I'll sort of say to clients, you want, like any other business, like an airline or whatever, you want them to make money. You just don't want to rock up to the car park and see every staff member there driving a Ferrari. Businesses need to be profitable. It's good to be profitable. But with those price increases, that's been hard because I think people felt as though the builders were taking the mickey out of them, when really it was a question of viability. And even knowing that despite the price increases and stuff that got put through, in some cases it just wasn't even enough.
Yeah, still you're losing money.
Yeah.
Those initial price increases that you've got to site and gone, yeah, this is it, in the early days, you would still have many of those that would have lost you money.
Oh, and to be honest, it's not until some people have collected their keys and they've seen everything play out over the last couple of years that I had one client, he was quite under the pump. He was sort of semi-retired and just said, I don't have much more to fall back on. So, I need this house to be built, blah, 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 which I, absolutely supported and understood. But it wasn't until he got the keys at the end that he said, I really appreciate what you guys have done. And I probably didn't understand enough at that point in time just what this all looked like and what it meant. And, I said to him, that's fine. You're not in this industry. I don't expect you to understand it. It was at that point in time I really needed you to trust us. Thankfully you did. You went ahead, you built your house. Obviously you now got some good equity in it. Yeah, at that point in time, they're looking at us going, I don't know if I can trust you.
Well, you think about a lot of the builders, the big ones especially, they're that big that they seem nearly like quasi-government organisations. Like they can't fail.
Yeah.
Like they are essentially profiteering from everything that's going on. It's really hard as a consumer to understand how much of this are you actually taking as profit, how much is catching up, should I even have to pay for this? We signed a contract that you have to fulfill this contract, that's your obligation. All those feelings start to come in, right? There's frustrations everywhere, and it really has been, for many cases in terms of the builder and the client, both have felt like they've lost. And when you think about some of the things we've seen in the media recently on a couple of those builders that still haven't finished their homes, that we're talking about a couple of big companies here, there are still people who are 3-4 years down the line paying rent, paying tens of thousands of dollars in interest.
Yeah.
The emotional toll, not only the financial toll, is significant here. Really isn't a winner's game for most of the people involved in this.
It's also the intersection of two things. You've got the client where it's very emotional. It's very real. It's it's personal. But then you've got the builder as the corporate entity or the business or something where it's not as emotional. It's very pragmatic. But you get those two things intersecting, and that's where you will get that tension. At the same time, it very much does get personal for the builder because no one goes out, every morning and goes, oh, how can I upset some people today?
Now, I don't want to spend too much more time looking back. You've got some insights that most people wouldn't in terms of decisioning on this period of time in the industry in the first place. You've been in the boardrooms with the Premier and ministers who are making decisions about this building boost in the first place. The government's come out a number of times and said, hey, no one could have known, don't blame us, we were just trying to help.
Yeah.
But clearly there is a nexus between the massive sugar hit that these boosts have created. History has shown that they never really work out the way you want them to, and a lot of people having suffered in all the ways we've just spoken about, right?
Yeah.
Now, hindsight's fantastic, which is exactly what the government would say. That would be the line. What was going on in those boardroom meetings at the time? Did the industry want this? Was the industry saying, McGowan, you must give us these building boosts. We're on our knees pre-COVID anyway. We need help. Or was the building industry saying, look, we're actually picking up pretty well here. There are some green shoots. Probably don't need all the help. Hold fire and we'll let you know.
I still remember when we had that 6-week lockdown at the beginning and we closed the borders, and that first few days working from home, we'd seen our inquiry levels just kind of evaporate for about 48, 72 hours. And that was really strange. We're a bigger builder. We've got big brands. We see hundreds of inquiries rolling through. And all of a sudden, it literally was going to zero. But then, strangely enough, the inquiry then picked up because all of a sudden people were at home. They were still working or whatever, but I think people all of a sudden just had a bit more time and they were browsing. We saw our duration on websites increase. Interesting, just prior to that, though, we'd seen the industry be low, but it was showing green shoots. There was a level of optimism. Sure, it wasn't going to just go massive overnight, but you had come into it thinking, no, mate, I think this is going to be a good year. I think things are actually improving. I think we've hit the low.
I remember that's how we felt on the podcast as well.
Yeah.
It was the first year or so of the podcast, and that message was, it's a green shoots time in the market, not only just in the construction space, but the residential property market in general.
Oh, and that's the thing. So I felt we were in that Jan-February period thinking, I feel like the industry is in recovery. And then obviously COVID, we had that 6-week lockdown at first. And we saw that inquiry dissipate, but then it started to pick up again. And it was at that point that your industry bodies did what they need to do, and they called meetings with your small, medium, large builders, held on Zoom, We then had access to the Premier, the Treasurer, a Housing Minister. It was good conversation. There was a mixture of opinions. I think some were worried about it could get worse. At that point, they were saying, the impact of this COVID thing is going to probably be about 2 years. And I think that's probably one thing that rattled everyone was just like, hang on a minute, this isn't going to be something that's going to last like a month or two. They're saying this could take 2 years. And we're only a couple of weeks into lockdown. So you're sort of sitting there going, so hang on a minute, you're saying that we could be working from home for 2 years.
The abyss is in front of you.
Yeah. So I think there was a level of fear. We were worried that as WA, we had already been in a low with property and housing and everything versus, say, the East Coast where they were in a good place. So them dropping wasn't necessarily the worst thing, whereas for us it was quite scary. That's where I empathise with the government because, I mean, you can appreciate these meetings. It's not like these meetings go for days. You know, it's like a 45-minute Zoom call. So in that, they're going to have to try and decipher from a number of different people in the room, okay, what's the consensus, what's the take? The Zoom chats and with the builders, but I think the general concern was how long could this go for? They then started talking about stimulus. They talked about rebates. There was a level of stimulus might not be the worst idea, but there was a lot of caution around it. Not all of us are carrying the same level of experience. We haven't all lived through the same thing. We're not operating in the same markets, demographics, all that kind of thing. So for some, there was like, well, you know, stimulus won't do anything for the high end of the market. They're not interested in stimulus. It was more around your first home buyers. You could just see that they'd already announced then at that point the federal government was looking to do something. I think some in the room said, just let the federal government do it, the Liberal government. They said, just let them do that.
In hindsight, that would have been enough, wouldn't it?
I think it would have been enough. I think to me, the thing I was fascinated by was, from our point of view, our thing was, let the federal government do their stimulus and let it run to December. Have a state stimulus, possibly kick in from January, at which point you'll know a lot more about how the federal stimulus has gone because you might not even need it. But put it in your budget from September, October, so that if the federal stimulus comes in and it really doesn't do what they wanted it to do, you've got the ability to pull another lever and have a 3-month period of double stimulus or something like that. That was something that we talked about. Some were like, no, lots of stimulus, you know, the more the better. Let's do federal, state, you know, let's,
agreed.
Every bit of stimulus you can come up with, let's just get it. And then there were others that were just like, it's a hard no, don't do anything, just let this play out. I think it probably maybe also gave some insight into how the different builders were probably feeling at the time.
Yeah.
You know, some were probably playing a different game of poker to others, but that was sort of what played out. And obviously then you have to step back and go, okay, well, what does the government do with that? And I think there was an element of its politics. They are playing a game. So you've got a Liberal federal government, you've got a Labor state government. So they are going to want to make sure that they're doing a good, they're doing a good job too.
Doing what they need to be.
Yes, I don't blame them for that. I get the game. I think at the same time, there was also this element of thinking it's been quite hard going. So is this stimulus going to be enough? And the conversation did come up around how much should it run for? How much do we need? And I will say in the conversations that I was privy to, I don't think the government or the builders or anyone in that room for that matter actually ever expected the take-up that it got. So, yeah.
Well, think about the take-up. We're providing stimulus into an industry that is sales-based, right?
Yeah.
The front door of all these building companies managed by some of the best salesmen in the state. That's the business. It's sales. It's marketing for a product that is a basic need. So, of course, the big guys in the room straight away will fill their books first. And what we've seen is the biggest company in the state, one of the biggest in the country, still trying to fulfill their obligations over the last 4 years and have shut the door essentially for the last year on new business. Surely that has augmented the market.
It certainly has. I mean, I think it also depends on your access to experience, knowledge. And it was our building manager who's been with our family for about 30 plus years. He's leaned back in his chair and just said, it doesn't matter how many you sell. It's how many you can build. That's how this industry works. We took heed of that straight away and we reverse engineered how many do we think we can build? And that's where we set our sales caps. I think a number of builders did that. I think there's a couple others that went, how many can we get?
Yeah, how can we really smash this market?
Yeah, and if we're the biggest or we're bigger or, people are going to get drawn to us. And it's like, and yeah, I can see logic and merit in that way of thinking, but... Poison
chalice, it's sure the chickens have come back to roost. There is a direct alignment here between greed and pain.
Yeah, and I think then the next part then that followed on from that though was, as a builder, you have your budgets and you work with a cancellation rate. So different markets, different cancellation rates. First home buyers might have a higher cancellation rate to your high end where there's zero to little cancellation rate. We factored all of that in. I think at that point, across as an average, we were, as a builder across a multitude of markets and regions, we're probably sitting around 15 to 20% cancellation rate. It was at 8. So you're sitting there looking at people going, we need you to cancel. And it just wasn't happening.
And then on the other side of the spectrum, you look at those first companies to have gone into administration. They were the small guys. They were the ones who had probably got experience at 10 to 20 homes a year, who suddenly took on 100 jobs because why not?
Yeah. Oh, and
it's like a Chihuahua with a Great Dane's food bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading an article at the time, or I actually first saw it on Instagram. A builder who'd started up and in their first month sold 100 homes. Anyone who's in the industry will look at that and go, in your first month of business, you do not want to go out and sell 100 homes. And obviously that's played out how it has, but that was hard to watch because you were looking at it and going,
train wreck in front of us.
I think they're comfortable because I don't think they don't know what they don't know. And I don't think the clients know. And I
remember this company, and they were even on Facebook marketing how successful they are and how excited they are to have so many projects. And I'm looking at it as a non-builder going, you're stuffed, mate.
Yeah, well, because building companies, it's all cash flow.
Yeah.
So you will sell a bunch of houses, however many, could be 5, 10, or however many. You'll get deposits, and they all come into your bank account. And all of a sudden you can go, wow, look at all that money.
I'm rich.
But what is then inevitable is you will then have to start paying out for everything. Surveys, engineering, you're paying your own staff, building licenses, approvals, a whole lot. And all of a sudden you're then going, okay, how much have I got left? And then you keep obviously doing your different claim stages and all that kind of thing. But what you're hoping for is that at the end of that project, you hand over the keys and you'll have some money left over. And that's what you've profited.
Is that normally the last progress payment, or do builders usually take a bit every single step? It feels like, especially over the last few years, not only has there not been any profit at any step along the way, the last one has been where the loss is made, but even to the point where you get to plate height, which is where you've seen it very clearly amongst the builders who are going bust. If they get stuck at plate height, it's because they recognise from here on in, when all the expensive stuff comes in, I've already front-ended a lot of my progress claims, I don't have the money to finish this.
I think unfortunately with some of the smaller guys, they definitely know how to build a good house. They're extremely honourable, all that kind of thing. But they may not necessarily be carrying the knowledge or the people in their team, whether it's in-house or outsourced, to be doing that sort of modelling. And that's where I think they just kind of blissfully got caught unaware.
Well, a lot of those smaller guys are ambitious tradies. They might have been a tiler. They might have been a carpenter. Wanted to do something more than that. Decided to run a business. No financial nous. Bit of money in the bank. Maybe some family money to get started. And the first couple of projects, the first couple of years, hey, this is working. And then bang. First time there was actually a situation where they had to manage the books, it's all fallen apart in front of them.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I came across one builder that did sadly collapse a couple of years ago, visited a number of their sites once they'd gone under. You walked around, you're like, the quality is really good.
Yeah.
Like this person builds a really good house. I remember speaking to someone and they said, oh, what did you think happened? I said, my take on it is I don't think they understood cash flow. They actually have been a really good operator. I think actually they've responsibly called it and sadly gone under. It's not good to see happen, but I think that was the right thing to do. But yeah, they did not understand the cash flow to see what was coming, and then they've just appeared one week and gone, hang on a minute, I can't pay people.
And that is the sad story for me about this, where there has to be some culpability, I think, even if it's just morally, on the decisions of the state government here, because there are a number of builders who are very high integrity, high value, high quality, small companies that, but for this building boost, would still be working today, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
There are just as many of them as there were the shop front window with minimal experience, none of the integrity you'd like. Snake oil salesmen that we've seen have also gone under. Just as many of those companies are actually being really good small family businesses.
Oh, definitely. And I think in any industry, you'll always have that. It's how do you protect an industry, and more importantly, how do you protect your consumers against that? I think there are a number of things in place. I think people probably underestimate that, but at the same time, what is hard is when that does start to occur, can the government or the industry or whatever respond quick enough to shut it down before it gets out of control? But
it doesn't seem like it. We've seen stuff in the news about one particular company over the last few months. It really doesn't seem like a proactive approach has been taken to actually get control of the outcome of this company's building progress by anyone up until the last couple of weeks, when really the industry has been watching this for a good year that the writing's been on the wall.
There's definitely rumour, and obviously there's a bit playing out in the media. At the end of the day, it's people, and we all inherently like to think that people are good people. They're going to do what they say they will do. They're not going to necessarily falsify or anything like that, but it's one of those things where it's just kind of caught up and it's played out the way it has. I don't think anyone involved has necessarily, as I said before, woken up, gone, how can I annoy people today? I think they've gone out with good intentions, but it's got caught up and it's spiraled. And I think, unfortunately, especially with building companies, you just got to keep building. Even the moment that you're caught out and saying, okay, we're behind, we don't have cash flow, we've got to get progress, all that kind of thing, it's very, very hard to get on top of that.
If you don't have a huge cash base in the first place.
Absolutely.
All these builds, I guess, losses that they have to realise.
Yeah.
They're either going to realise them or they're going to go into administration. Which one is it? And I believe that really that decision should have been made a year ago, because the writing was on the wall that all few hundred of these homes were losses that we all knew were about to happen. Are you going to take the loss or are you going to go administration? We can't just sit in limbo.
Yeah, and I think that's where there's probably an optimistic side that we'll find a way through this. The pressure in the industry was like, you can't get people easily. So your building sites are going to sit there while you are getting people. While you are getting people, those sites are going to cop a hammering in the weather. Things will sadly get stolen, damaged, which then creates more work, which means that not only is that house already costing you money, it's now probably going to cost you more money, and you have to get on top of that. Upon which, once you find the people who will come on site and do the work, it's only a matter of time before they go, I can do this, but I know I can also go over there and I don't have to deal with this. Yeah. So I'm just going to go over there.
And I don't trust I'm going to get paid, all those sort of things as well.
It would have been nice to have seen a different kind of story play out. I think that's what a lot of us deep down hope for. No one wants to open up the paper and see people looking distraught standing outside their family home. That's just not what we're in this for.
Let's try and think positively if we can.
Yeah.
Let's look forward.
Yep.
What's the state of play right now in the building industry compared to what it was a couple of years ago? If I'm a consumer losing hope in the established market, can't find anything, it's too expensive, I'm 50th in the line to get into the Home Open, I'm thinking maybe I'll have a look at building my own home, but I'm nervous about the last few years. I don't know who to trust. I don't know what the price is going to be. What is it versus what it was? How long is it going to take? What's the state of play right now? If someone walked through your door today, for example, versus what it would have been 2 years ago and 5 years ago?
Now, the build times have definitely come down. Homes that were taking us 12 months to build are now taking us around 8 months. That build time has definitely come back down again. That's subject to, what sort of house it is, location, all that kind of thing. But I'd say your average outer metropolitan or like fringe of the metropolitan house is taking around that sort of time frame to build. I'm also saying that based on the markets that we're in, we don't build typically basic first home buyer houses. We tend to more operate within the second and third home buyers. The cost escalations that we were seeing is nothing like it was before. I mean, you would see a $300,000 house get a price increase of $40,000, $50,000. Now, if you're seeing price increases, they probably tend to be around like maybe $5,000. But even then, I think builders are back at a stage now where
they just wear it.
We'll just sort of wear it. You look at that and you kind of go, no, that should be fine, because it's calmed down a lot. So, yeah.
In terms of the trade rates.
Yeah, I think like your trade rates have gone up. They pegged back a little bit. They're not like they were before, like 5 years ago. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that the trade rates have done that, because it's good. It's a good career. That has calmed down now.
Can we get some examples with those main trades? What were you paying per unit 5 years ago versus what you're paying today?
Oh, so you're paying like 83, 85 cents to a brickie. It's worse. You were kind of, I say worse for us, it was like $2.70, $3. And now it's probably settling at around $2, $2.20.
Okay.
Chippies and all that. It depends on the area, but I mean, in some cases you're paying 4 times the amount on your rates, just based on the complexity of the roof, the location you're in. Painters and tilers, they've had still seen a little bit of movement, but I'll say they're the bottleneck at the moment. That's where a lot of the work in progress is in the industry. But that settled where it is. So you kind of sit there and go, if that's where the rates are going to stay, that's good. It seems as though everyone can make $1. We're not price increasing people. Like, people can budget and know that they're not going to get this big surprise. I think with those cost escalations that we saw before, it was actually just the speed at which they came through. It was very short.
The uncertainty.
Sharp. Yeah. Whereas now you'll look at that and go, we can hold that price for a while. And then when you go on a site, you can look at it and go, yep, no, we're good. So yeah.
Let's say you've got a house that you've just signed yesterday for $400,000 turnkey.
Yep.
What would that have been just before COVID?
270, 280.
That's something that we're going to have to live with as a consumer base now.
Yeah.
It's not going down,
Yeah.
but it's probably not going to be going up in a substantial, volatile way going forward. 400 grand is the old $270,000 family home.
Yep.
It is what it is. And with confidence now, you could walk through the door of a major builder, even a small to mid-tier builder if they're still around.
Yep.
And you can say, well, look, this is what the budget is. The land will be 400, the house is 400. It's going to take me about 8 months, and I can have some level of confidence that the quality of the trade is going to be to expectation.
Yeah, it's adjusting to that new norm. I think people who have built maybe 4 or 5 years ago, if they were to come in and build again now, they'd be in for a bit of a shock, because they'd be like, wow, that really moved quite quickly in a short space of time. Someone who built 10, 20 years ago, obviously in for a shock, but they'll be like, a bit of time has passed.
Yeah.
And that's where we've seen that inflation. We've seen hopefully the wage growth has caught up with it a bit. I'm surrounded by new home building every day, but I do have to keep stepping back and remind myself, like, building a new home is a privilege. It's not a given right. It's buying a brand new car versus a second-hand car. It does cost money, and you do have to pay because of what you can do with that. You're getting a brand new home. You're able to make choices versus compromises. So there's something that does come with that. But yeah, in terms of the quality, the build times, all that kind of thing, it's good to see that has really come back. I actually do think, though, compared to some of the other booms that have been around, and I speak to one boom from my experience, surprisingly, one thing that the industry seemed to do quite a good job of in this boom was maintain quality. So the quality has actually been really good. And I think that's one thing is throughout all of this, when your trades are on site, it's great. The work is there, the time that they might be laying bricks or putting roofs up or whatever, that time frame hasn't really blown out. It's the time between trades.
The lead times.
The quality and everything like that has actually been really good. Don't get me wrong, you do see some horror stories out there. It might be reflective of the builder. It might be reflective of just one job. I'll be open. We do on average around 1,000 homes a year. We do get it wrong every now and again. But I think we're a good builder, and there's a lot of other good builders out there that when that does arise, you respond and react quickly to rectify it.
Put your hand up.
Yeah, you sit there and go, sorry, because I mean, the example I'll give to a customer is I've got a toaster. I buy the same loaf of bread every week. For some reason, the toast doesn't always come out the same way. It's the same thing with the house. Despite everything, all the measures, protocols, everything I have in place, every now and again, I just get a house and something just might go wrong, and I'm cursing it as much as the client is. But
At the end of the day, it's your money, right? When
Yeah,
you're fixing this stuff up, it's costing you.
Oh, and an upset client is even more compounding, because then it's putting pressure on the team, makes it worse. But I think that one thing, though, that we will sort of always continue to say to people, though, is when you're building, make sure you've got that contingency in place for cost escalation, but just also people get excited. They sign up for a new house, and then the next thing they go, I want a new washer and dryer. I want to put new couches. I want to get new cutlery. I'm just going to get new everything. And you're like, okay, that's good. Maybe wait until you're really at the end. I've seen people sign up for a house and they're excited, and then they'll come in and go, oh, we're going to be away for a week. Yeah, because we've signed up, we're excited, we're just going to go to Bali for a week. And you're like, whoa. You're pretty much just signing up for the most expensive thing in your life.
Yeah.
Just cool your jets on Bali.
Yeah.
So it's actually getting people to financially manage that. And that was something that a lot of the builders were really going back to people when they were signing up, was factor in enough for a price increase. It's probably going to come. The hard part was when you did have people who did factor that in, but the price increase was even more than what they'd factored in. And that's where you're like, okay, tough decisions.
The hardest thing for me to swallow was the building boost. We're sitting there with 45 grand in our pocket, and the price increase was more than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where you'd see the writing on the wall that these grants weren't a great outcome for a lot of people. They were supposed to subsidise the cost of a build, not actually end up costing them more than the subsidy.
Absolutely. We had a price increase delivered to someone, single. It was her first home, all that kind of thing. She'd bought her block. She'd been delivered her price increase, wasn't happy about it, called through to our reception, got connected through to me, had a chat to me about it. I met her face to face, and she sort of shared with me her situation and what it all looked like and the increase in that. It goes, I just don't think I can do this. And sat down, had a look, and went through it with her. And I said, look, I don't think you should. She was kind of a bit shocked. She was just like, and I said, and this is weird. I'm a builder who wants to build things, and I'm telling you right now, don't build. And she said, so what would you do? And I said, honestly, don't pay the price increase, cancel with us, sell the block, and never drive down that street again. That's my advice. And she said, I don't want to sell the block though, because I'm going to pay tax. I'll pay capital gains. And I said, yeah, that's
means
fine.
You made a profit.
And she goes, yeah. And he goes, oh, I've been told you don't want to pay capital gains. I said, no, your understanding of tax is flawed. Tax means you've made money. What you don't want to pay is too much tax, but that's another story.
That's another episode.
Yeah. And I said, like, capital gains is okay. Sell the block. Anyway, she did that. That was kind of the end of that. And then about 6 months later, funnily enough, a message came through from her, and she actually said, oh, I ended up buying established, really happy, really relieved. I've been able to move on, blah, blah, blah. And I did make money on my block. That was a bittersweet message to get, because part of me that's devastated that her step into building a home hasn't necessarily been great. But she was able to not get herself into a bit of a mess. She was able to buy something established. And I like to think that in some matter of time, she'll want to build a house again, and she'll step in and she'll have a pleasant experience. There's all these different stories that come out of this, in that you've got the good and the bad. And you have people who have done really well. Some suburbs have just grown exponentially in
I
price.
think about a couple of clients we had who, very just out of luck, signed a build contract in the first week of June with one of the major builders, got cracking before any of the cost escalations started to come through.
Yeah.
So we've built, for example, a triplex development for $650,000 that would now cost over $1 million to build.
Yeah.
In a suburb in 2020 that's now 50% more expensive than it was back then, and looking at a significant life-changing profit from getting on with doing what they were doing at that exact right time. And then a client who a year later took a bit of time to make the decisions, didn't want to sign anything because they were concerned about the builder, then got to a point where, hey, look, the cost escalation is just more than I can actually swallow, afford. I can't see it making any sense in the market anymore, and it all being a waste of time. Yeah. Timing is everything, especially when volatility is so high.
Oh, and I reckon there's a lot of winners out there, and they're probably some of the ones that we're not hearing too much from. But I definitely know some people just couldn't have timed it any better. And yeah, and good on them. Well done. That's the game, isn't it?
Jay, thank you so much for coming in, mate. It's been a very candid conversation. I'm sure a lot of your colleagues will be listening, nodding their head, saying, yeah, I went through the same thing. A lot of clients, home builders, nodding their head, going, yep, we all went through this. And I think as a listenership, as a community, a West Australian community mostly, to cathartically talk about the last few years that we've all gone through on both sides of the fence, and hopefully draw a bit of a line in the sand and start to work together again on solving this big problem we've got in Western Australia, and that is our ability to supply the amount of houses we need for the people we have. And the better we can work at that in both the planning, construction, financing space, as all professionals and consumers in this market, to do this as efficiently and gregariously as possible, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mate, thanks for your time.
Cool. Thanks, Trent.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Perth Property Show. If you've only just joined the conversation, you can catch up by heading over to our website, perthpropertyshow.com.au, subscribing to the podcast, or joining our Facebook page. Don't forget to tune in next Monday at 7 a.m. for more expert insights, local analysis, and suburb spotlights. Happy hunting!